so that we're up to date on the latest current policy or issues at the moment and can ask those questions during the tour.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can certainly do that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the room? Nothing online? Where? Okay. Sharona?
Yes, hi, thank you very much. I wanted to bring up the issue of vehicle batteries. A lot of times when these vehicles have lived their life, the battery is a major issue, not only for our environment, but also replacing the battery is extremely costly. And if that's something that perhaps our committee can look at and see, one, how to dispose of these batteries, and two, when it comes to replacing them, what we can do and steps that we can take to control or perhaps see how we can make it more affordable for people. If that's the direction that we're trying to go in, this is going to be something important for us to look at. Thank you.
You. Wes, speak. I think you're still muted.
Mr. Speak, we cannot hear you.
Okay.
There you go. Uh-oh. Huh? Okay. All righty. Then we're going to move on to item 10, the broadband permit streamline. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, something I think we should start regularly looking at is with the Olympics, a regular item for updates for our communities. I think I know Metrolink, we're having discussions on a regular basis. We have somebody involved with that. But it's going to affect a lot of our cities if there's going to be events in your areas, that there should be some coordination or discussion so that we are kept in the loop. I mean, I don't need to explain anymore. I think it's something in necessity.
The chair had also raised that as well, and so it's something we're going to have discussions internally. We do anticipate some presentations at the regional council as well, and so we'll try to work through how to bring some of these items to TC also.
Okay, thank you.
Annie, we need to talk a little louder when you're talking, or especially for us older ears.
I'm going to try and get Wes Speak back on.
One more time. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Speak up.
Hey, look at that. I just wanted to clarify future agenda items. If there was something that we wanted to add to a future meeting, would that go through you, the chair, or?
I believe so, yeah. Okay,
great. And I just had something I've been working on the last few years that I'm deeming truth in tolling. And it's basically the idea that people that take the toll lanes have no idea what they're buying. They don't see how much time they're savings. You know, they're all they see is a price. So I'd like at some future date to have some ideas placed on the agenda for us to talk about, or at least talk about the issue itself, which is the fact that, people, the perception is if the price is really high in a toll, that the general purpose lanes are busy or are packed, and that is not the case. 90% of the toll lanes in the state are based on how full and how busy the toll lanes are. So I think there's a basic misunderstanding of what people are buying. And I'd like that to be a future agenda item at some point. And if you like clarification, Chair, I'll reach out, and I have a little write about prepared I can send over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Sounds great. Yeah, send that to us. Ray Marquez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This morning we had an update. We had two of our employees actually go to Paris, and they gave us an update as far as what they saw. And I think they should actually present the same thing they presented to the EAC today for our committee in the future. A lot of good information.
Thank you. Jan Harnick.
Thank you so much. I
believe the points made by committee member Nazarian are important and valid regarding the batteries. And it seems to me that that would be something more appropriately initially taken up by the Energy and Environmental Committee. But it does make sense to entertain that, I believe. Thank you.
Gil?
Yes, yeah. And maybe this is something I could take up with Mr. Salgado, the local rep, but something perhaps how the border, I guess, can incorporate into the Transportation Committee. I know there's been tours and whatnot. Maybe it's just I need to get a little bit more educated, but how's the border? I know it's federal and local, but you know, the border economy, US-Mexico border right there, the Imperial County, $1 billion going in and out. It's ports. How do we how's that incorporate into any of these or the Transportation Committee? Just those are potential economic development for my community. And so I know with the regional transportation planning and whatnot, how can that be incorporated more in this, or at least for this committee? Or like I said, maybe just me working with David on some initiatives. So
Are you talking about like taking a tour of the border or just discussing it?
discussing, I know there's been tours, but how's that incorporating to all this, the regional planning? Like I said, so billions of dollars going through there, and how is it impacting us? How are we leveraging that just for the benefit of our region as well as my local county community?
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to number 10. I'm going to call on Philip Law, manager of our Mobility Planning and Goods Movement Department.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. I am Philip Law. I manage our Mobility Planning and Goods Movement Department at SCAG. I am here today to talk about the Broadband Permit Streamlining Report and Model Ordinance. I'm here in place of Roland Oak, our project manager. He unfortunately could not be here in person, so I'll do my best to convey to you the great work that's gone into this project led by Roland and his team and the important findings that have come out of it. Okay, let me try that again. Maybe I can just ask Avi to advance the slides if this is not working. Okay, so while that is happening, I'll give you a brief recap on how we got to this point. Why are we doing this? So since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, both SCAG and our sister MPO to the south, the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, have been actively involved in broadband-related efforts and have worked together in close partnership. In July of 2020, the Regional Council adopted a resolution 206232 affirming SCAG's commitment to advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in Southern California as part of related efforts, including developing our Equity Baseline Conditions Report. We have recognized that gaps in access to broadband and the associated economic, social, and educational opportunities that provides, that these gaps persist for certain socioeconomic groups. This includes households that are either low income, have lower educational levels, are in rural areas, or are Black or Hispanic Latino, and we call this the digital divide. So subsequently, in February 2021, the Regional Council adopted Resolution 216292, directing staff to establish a broadband action plan to help bridge this digital divide. A key element of both the resolution and the action plan is to identify ways to streamline the permitting process to enable the efficient delivery of broadband infrastructure. So I'm not sure what's going on with the slides, but let me continue. So SANDAG similarly adopted its own resolution, and using the MPO resolutions as a template, subsequently all 7 counties in both of our regions adopted their own resolutions. So there are several projects that have been completed or underway. I'll just highlight a few. I mentioned our digital action plan that was adopted by the Regional Council in April of 2023. SCAG was awarded a local agency technical assistance or LATA grant from the California Public Utilities Commission. We will help establish the foundation for last mile broadband services within 3 opportunity zones in our region, and you will see a separate receive and file report on this in your agenda packet. We also completed a VMT report that concluded telework has the potential to reduce VMT by reducing trips. We've incorporated broadband policies and strategies into the 2024 Connect SoCal. And finally, our recently completed permit streamlining report, and that is the focus of today's presentation. So now I'll turn to the permit streamlining report. And if you, the slides are in the agenda packet if you want to follow along that way. So let's see, as a foundational step for our broadband initiatives, we established and have been hosting together with SANDAG, the SoCal Transformation Working Group, which includes participation from public, private, and nonprofit sector stakeholders. On the permitting efforts, SCAG led the project management for the report and model ordinance development, while SANDAG spearheaded outreach efforts, including coordination and hosting workshops. So again, this has been a collaborative effort between both MPOs supported by many stakeholders. And in early 2022, SANDAG launched the Regional Digital Infrastructure Task Force, or REDIT, consisting of regional broadband consortia and staff from local jurisdictions, as well as those from internet service providers. Although it initially focused on just our 2 regions, the task force garnered interest from jurisdictions in Central and Northern California as well, and broadening its impact. And also in August of 2022, the state of California released the local permitting playbook, and at SCAG, we officially launched our project in December of 2022. So briefly, an overview of the state's local permitting playbook. The playbook serves as a foundation. Oh. All right, sorry about that. Let's see if we can. Catch us up to the slide that I'm on. There we go. Okay, so the California permitting playbook, it serves as a strong foundation for a regional effort. And while it provides valuable guidance, it is high level and does not provide a focused approach for our specific needs. So we've ensured that our project aligns with and complements the state playbook recommendations, and you'll see evidence of that as I go through these slides. All right. So while the state developed their playbook, SANDAG and SCAG, I mentioned, had convened the REDIT task force. And through multiple discussions with the participants, we identified several core pain points. And some key examples include, with reference to broadband policy shortcomings, there's a lack of recognition in general plans, there's the absence of digital plans, or no relevant ordinance in place. Permitting process times vary widely, ranging from as little as 2 weeks to several months or even years. There's insufficient staffing to handle the volume and complexity of permits. And there's a lack of a clear fee structure and confusion over additional costs such as beautification or street repair fees being added on top of permitting costs. So after identifying the pain points, the REDIT task force proposed the following solutions, which are consistent with the state's playbook. This includes enhancing transparency, training staff, exploring the use of micro-trenching, considering implementing batch permitting to process multiple permits efficiently, and developing a comprehensive ordinance to standardize the permitting processes. Notably, REDIT introduced the idea of guided applications such as checklists or flowcharts that clearly outline the permit requirements and specify which department handles the permit. We then followed up with a survey regarding local permitting processes. The survey was sent to all jurisdictions within our 2 regions. Unfortunately, the response rate low, likely due to survey burnout. However, the responses we did receive identified consistent pain points and confirmed our findings from the state playbook and from the REDIT task force. We also followed up with survey respondents as well as some jurisdictions that weren't able to respond to the survey, and we're able to conduct one-on-one interviews with the jurisdictions that are listed here. So while our findings from the interviews were consistent with the pain points I mentioned previously, we did uncover some additional information most jurisdictions are unaware of or are too under-resourced to execute the Federal Communications Commission shot clock requirements. So the FCC requires that permits for wireless services be issued within 60 days of a project application being submitted. On the other hand, we also found that some jurisdictions are already ahead of the curve. So Orange and San Diego counties and the cities of LA and Oceanside, among others, already have an online permitting portal. LA County has already developed a wireless communications ordinance. So we also interviewed internet service providers or ISPs. These interview findings have been anonymized to allow for candid responses. And from their perspective, these are critical in helping to streamline the process, including establishing guidelines, define checklists, and micro-trenching standards. And we'll touch on those highlighted items in the subsequent slides. So I'll discuss the permit streamlining report and the model ordinance next. I'll note that the links to these documents are available in your staff report on page 164 of the agenda packet. So we used the interview surveys and research to develop the permit streamlining report. We wanted it to be grounded in reality. So for example, we stayed away from SQL reform, but our goal was to develop recommendations and a universal ordinance that attempts to address all of the problems that we uncovered. However, through the work, we've come to recognize that the ordinance will be of varying value depending on the jurisdiction and context. Larger cities likely already have a good system in place, but some of the language in the ordinance can still be effective and useful. Smaller cities would likely benefit the most, as many do not have any form of ordinance. So the report identified 10 core problems. I'll briefly highlight just a few of them. Inconsistent permit fees. So there's a lack of uniformity in permit fees across neighboring jurisdictions, with potentially significant disparities where one jurisdiction's fees are much higher than another's. There are also additional fees, so extra costs related to road repair or beautification can often complicate the process, leading to back and forth negotiations between ISPs and cities over responsibility for these charges. Staffing shortages, there's a lack of dedicated staff to handle broadband permitting. And there are several needs related to improved mapping, an online portal, and ordinance development. So to address the core problems that we identified, our report suggests best practices that can help solve or mitigate these issues. This includes design standards for things like microtrenching. So microtrenching is a method for installing broadband cables more quickly and with less disruption. It's faster and more cost-effective, and again, less disruptive compared to traditional methods that require larger and deeper trenches. Aerial fiber is a cheaper way to expand broadband by utilizing existing power lines to add extra cables for broadband services. We also identified formation of a joint powers authority that can be established to share resources, such as hiring staff or consultants to streamline efforts. Alternatively, we could consider leveraging our COGS as a central authority to issue permits within a subregion. We recognize that these solutions may not be applicable in every situation, so it is important to choose the best practice that aligns with specific needs. So based on our report findings, we then developed a model ordinance. This was designed to be a master template so that those within existing ordinance can also pick and choose additional language which may fit their needs. And the bulk of the core problems have been resolved in the ordinance. However, we do want to note that there are several issues that cannot be resolved through ordinance. This includes uniform permit fees, coordination efforts, and mapping and GIS, and those require some additional efforts outside of an ordinance. However, we do recommend pathways to potentially address those three remaining issues. So again, here's the list of the core solutions. Examples include a streamlined administrative review process, the exclusion of extra fees, and then suggested language regarding batch permitting and identification of staff for permit review. The ordinance document is an interactive PDF, so the user can be led to designated pages and sections by clicking on the items in the table of contents. So in addition to the ordinance, we also provide design standards and sample schematics for wire lines and wireless installation, microtrenching, drilling, boring, and so forth. We've also developed a flow chart for an optimal administrative process and an application checklist to guide staff and developers. So I mentioned previously, the ordinance was designed to be flexible and modular, so it allows a local jurisdiction to adopt all or parts of the provisions based on their needs. And what's interesting is that as we were sharing our drafts for review, some local jurisdictions started to use the ordinance as a template, or they indicated they were considering using some of the language. So we heard this from City of San Diego, City of Moore Park, County of Santa Barbara. So we're already seeing some proof that the ordinance is useful and implementable. So with the project complete, we do have a series of next steps to disseminate the findings. We have a mass marketing strategy to broadly distribute the report and ordinance. We'll collaborate with nonprofits and state and federal agencies. In fact, the California Department of Technology plans to feature our report and ordinance on the front page of their Broadband for All website. Both the Federal Communications Commission and the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, have prioritized streamlined permitting, and NTIA may feature our report on their website as well. We'll promote through participation on panels, webinars, and seminars. In fact, Roland recently joined a roundtable with GoBiz, Caltrans, Regional Broadband Consortia, and local jurisdictions to discuss permit streamlining. And as part of our Toolbox Tuesday forum at SCAG, we will develop a method to track progress and follow up with jurisdictions that implement the ordinance and invite them to help train other cities. And we're aiming for a workshop in the first quarter of 2025. So with that, let me conclude by thanking Roland and for his leadership on this project. Thanks to our consultant team, Tectonic Engineering. I think they, along with Roland, are actually on the Zoom in case there are questions. And then I will turn it back over to our vice chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know who's online. Got a hands up?
Yeah, so we will,
Let me open this. Let me do this first. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Cool. Go ahead. Any hands?
and we're not seeing any online, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Start over here with
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our city is largely working class and would be considered disadvantaged. We have just now completed almost a citywide installation of the fiber optic. In fact, some areas have 2 choices of fiber optic provider, and I hear we're going to 3. I just wanted to cover quickly the micro trenching in case anybody is interested in that. It is probably 80% less disruptive because it's a very narrow trench, but there's still considerable disruption where junctions and connections have to go in. And which gets me to my point is we need some kind of standards. If these standards are going to take care of the construction quality, great. But the work quality has been in our city was really poor. We had to really dog it. So I'm sensing from the presentation that maybe the people who want to install this are complaining about the cities being overly regulating. But if you look, you'll see huge loops of wires on every pole. And if you're talking about aerial, putting the fiber in aerial on overhead on the existing utility poles, in some instances, that's resulting in a new pole being put in place. And in communities that are looking to say, I want to get wires out of my view, I would like to have less. You're now getting more poles, more wires. The way these things are being run, I won't go on too much longer. This was quite a conversation in our city council meeting. But the way the wires are being run, you could almost reach up and grab them. There needs to be something that the industry is using very shoddy work practices from what we saw, and we really had to work it. If we're talking about core problems, that's one of them. The design standards need to somehow have some type of mechanism to, if the design standards are there, I gotta think they aren't being followed. So there's my 2 cents worth on that subject. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for sir, for your presentation. I just had a quick question regarding the surveys. I know that they're burdensome and they can be a real pain in the neck, but they're important. And I noticed Ventura County wasn't represented as being responsive to the survey. Can you confirm that or let me know who those surveys went to?
We sent surveys to every jurisdiction in our region, but we can follow up with you directly.
Okay,
on
yeah,
who
I'd
it
like
went
to know exactly what entity it went to. So maybe I can
can't. She's
facilitate
gotta tell
that
me.
process next time. Thank you.
Darren Spiegel?
Oh.
No, next,
Or Steve Sanchez,
sorry.
opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few questions. Our goal is to provide broadband for all, correct? So why do we always use the word diversity and try to break it down by race? Shouldn't we aim to just provide broadband instead of, it seems racist to try to provide broadband for one race and not another.
So if I understand your question correctly, the point of that was there are still groups that don't currently have broadband access. So actually, I don't have all the statistics in front of me, but if you look at what's available in our region and then focus on those areas that don't have access right now, then they are more likely to be within those socioeconomic categories.
So if a white person lives in a black neighborhood, they don't get broadband?
That's not what it means. It means that those
I know.
areas that don't
I'm just
have
trying to say,
access-
we should focus more on just providing the services than trying to break it down by race. My other question is regarding infrastructure and broadband. Is our goal to try to make broadband a government entity, or are we trying to work with the ISP providers, or are we trying to make this kind of are we encouraging government to?
That's not one of the recommendations. The effort is to try to identify the pain points that are preventing the installation of broadband infrastructure to address these issues that I mentioned about lack of access.
And then micro stamping, it is convenient because you don't have to go so deep. But haven't there been issues with damage for road and heat and some of these hot, really hot areas like the Coachella Valley, 120 degrees versus areas where it's a little cooler, like in the coastal areas. Well, I'm not opposed or supporting, micro trenching. I think those things need to be addressed a little bit more because in some areas they are more susceptible to the elements than they are in other areas.
So I don't know, Roland looks like he has his hand up. I don't have the details on micro trenching, but if we can either follow up or if Roland has something specific.
Sure. Thank you. I apologize. I couldn't be there. I'm battling the tail end of a COVID illness right now. So again, I apologize, but I'm glad to answer any questions. On the first question regarding, the
apologies for the interruption. We can barely hear you.
Can we follow up with you directly on the?
Yeah, because I believe it was the city of Fullerton that had a lot of issues with
We've only got 10 minutes per item, so we're trying to move it forward.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I was saying that now I can even hear myself. All right. I believe it's like the city of Fullerton that was having issues with micro trenching, causing road damages, because it goes a lot shorter down of a dig, right? It's just more susceptible to wear and tear from vehicles and the elements. Again, I'm not saying I'm supporting against it, but I just think it's something that we should really look into a little bit more.
Okay, Jan?
Thank you so much. I've sat through years of the Zoom meetings, the SoCal transformation. It was the second Thursday of each week, or of each month, excuse me. And I can tell you that you had private entities, you had government, you had business people. It was you named so many, and thank you for the great presentation and great tie also, Philip. But the goal was to get broadband to everybody and to get the good speeds and to give healthy speeds to everybody. We're fortunate in the Coachella Valley that we did the CV synchronization, which was for traffic. And so we put extra conduit in there at the same time so that we have provided a way for fiber and, private entities to put fiber in there. So the goal was to get it to everybody. Different places, we have places in Coachella where the water is right beneath the seats. And then we have the places where the 120 degrees is going to be an issue. So we're going to have to engineer differently for different areas. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We just have to figure out what's right for our communities. I have a question. When we were talking about the expedited processing, which I think is really important to all of us, if we came together as CVAG in the Coachella Valley, would we be able perhaps to have a workshop just for CVAG in all of our cities to get that permitting process expedited?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. And not a question, just a comment and maybe an observation as I look at the report and that we've got both SCAG and SANDAG have developed broadband permit streamlining reports and model ordinances. And you push that, you mentioned it in your presentation. Things like uniform permit fees, dedicated staff for broadband permits, prioritizing administrative and ministerial review strikes me as not just a good idea here, but I throw out to the group, probably a good idea for us to pursue in our own jurisdictions, and even more importantly, the legislature. Give us some opportunities to streamline processes and permitting, and we're going to be able to deliver more broadband to more people. We're maybe also going to be able to build more houses for more people. And so let's not only champion this in this sphere, which is great. I really appreciate it being done. Let's not lose sight of that in other areas. It will make a difference in so many policy areas that are important to us and the people we are privileged to serve.
Thank you. Kurt Hagman, Mr. President.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great report. I did sit through, I think 2.5 years of those phone calls, trying to find out what is, and all the points you brought up is great. But the reality is our jurisdictions are different. The providers, subcontractors are different. I remember back in Chino Hills, the day we first got fiber, we had perfectly nice repaved roads. And then 2 months later, after put the fiber in, they were all thrashed. And I think so part of the standardization of getting permits also needs to be the work quality. As that was mentioned, I think it's very important. Our communities are disadvantaged if they don't have access to broadband at this point. I think COVID really identified that weaknesses. And for a lot of the rural communities that don't have access, there is technology coming on board, but it is important that we work together because talking on those committee calls month after month, we're not the only game in town. The entire United States is going through this transformation to fiber. And so they're getting crews going back and forth. If your community or your city is taking a year to get permits, they're just going to bypass you, go somewhere else because there's plenty of markets to expand to. So it's at our advantage to try to make the process as easy as possible for them to get permits and get deployed so they can fit in their schedule and business plans. At the same time, we also need to, as brought up, bring up the standards of the quality of work and know what we're getting into before we just adopt something. So microtrenching may not work in all places. Put it on poles. I know most of my communities don't want to see wires on the poles anymore. But also for us to take those plans back like Coachella Valley did and make sure you're future-proofing your road work when you go out there and put an extra conduit in the roads. All those things come together. That's a discussion that we can help at SCAG, help our communities that may not have the staffing depth to do. This guideline's great, but it's also those other parts, the practicality of it, the follow-up, the quality control. So it's not just the standards that get them a permit, but also how do we adopt that to our own community going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Wapner.
Thank you. Sure, I can't hear anything. He's my interpreter. I just want to mention what Ontario ended up doing. Ontario likes to make sure that we're taking care of all over the city. And we noticed that our private provider was not providing service to a certain part of the city for businesses. And obviously economically, we want to make sure that happened. So we decided to take control ourselves, and we actually got in the fiber broadband business ourselves. We then continued that to the areas of the city that were not receiving broadband anywhere. Our entire city is now being provided either by us or by a private sector. In fact, we're in competition with the private sector. Now, I always believe the private sector should handle what they handle best, but if they're not going to serve our community, we're going to serve our community. So it's expensive, and I don't think we're ever going to see return on our investment, other than the fact that we now know that our folks in our community are going to be served. You know, they're handing out computers to students in the schools now, but a lot of our community can't afford broadband, so they have a computer and they can't hook it up to anything. So now we have the ability to actually provide that service, and we're pretty competitive with the private market. And we're actually the first ones to use 1 gig. We moved up from there. We started with 1 gig to all new parts of the city, and they're moving out to the rest of the city. So I can just say it's expensive. It's very expensive, but if you have the money and you want to make sure your community is served, I think it's really important that you do that. Don't wait. Don't wait for any public help from the state or federal government, because it isn't going to happen.
Thank you. Online, we have Bridget Lewis.
Great presentation. The question that I have, is there any data that you already have compiled to address fiber cuts, especially in the micro trenching realm, which can be expensive to fix?
I have the answer to that, but we can follow up with you. I did get a message from Roland. He mentioned that the risks of microtrenching are discussed in the report. We noted concerns during the interviews with local jurisdictions and ISPs.
Right. I understand that there is a concern. I just wanted to know, was there a dollar amount attached to the fiber cuts that jurisdictions have had to pay to repair those cuts?
Yeah, we can look into that and get back to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
In the time constraints we have, I'm going to move on to item 11. If you have any more questions on this item, number 10, please feel free to email the staff here at SCAG and they'll answer your questions. Number 11 is the goods movement. I'm going to call on Jonathan Raspa. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to make sure this is working. Got it. Thank you. All right. Good morning, Vice Chair Judge and committee members. My name is Jonathan Raspa. I'm a senior regional planner in the goods movement unit in the planning department, and I'll be presenting a quick update on the planning division's past good movements planning efforts in the freight sector. So after that, I'll provide an update on the status of the Zero Emissions Truck Infrastructure Study, or ZETI study, and recently completed freight listening sessions. And finally, I'll talk about the upcoming Comprehensive Sustainable Freight Plan, also known as On the Move, and how our past efforts will be leveraged in putting together that multi-year plan development in the upcoming year. So first, I'll review some of our unit's past planning efforts, studies, and programs really quickly, just to refresh the committee. So the goods movement unit has completed a number of dedicated freight studies. All of them are listed here on the slide. There's more we've been doing, but these are ones that have been published in the last 6 years. Of particular note are 2 projects: the Last Mile Freight Program Phase 1, which has been deploying zero emission medium duty and heavy duty trucks in Southern California in partnership with the MSRC and trucking fleets. So we're actually providing incentives for fleets to go out and buy zero emission trucks to operate in Southern California ahead of ACF and ACT guidance. Another one to note is the Goods Movement Community Opportunities Assessment Study, which was just completed last year. And this focused on analyzing the ability of communities impacted by freight to also capture the economic benefits that were associated with goods movement in the region. It also focused on developing a deeper understanding of key concerns in those communities, not just at a surface level, but for individual sites or communities that felt like their voices hadn't been heard. The next thing that was completed in March was the 2023 Goods Movement Resolution. The key principles are listed here, and this was the Regional Council's affirmation that the region's goods movement system needed a guiding vision, and that SCAG was best positioned to develop and advance this in partnership with regional agencies and local jurisdictions. It also helps spur the prioritization of our on-the-move plan as a critical element in planning for the future of transportation in Southern California. The first on-the-move study kind of kickstarted that, and we're looking to update and refresh that in light of changes, in the freight world in Southern California. We also hosted with the Regional Council a 2024 Goods Movement Presidential Priorities Panel, where representatives from the freight industry actually came in and discussed current and future issues. They really focused on the need for clear leadership in the region and extensive advanced planning to make sure that they can follow up and meet the goals that regulators are setting out for them. It also highlighted the continuing need for incentives to help the zero emissions fleet transition actually occur within the timeline set out by the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. Also, the Goods Movement Business Unit contributed a substantial technical report as part of the 2024 Connect SoCal. It focused primarily on the relationship between industrial land development and how those changes are affecting transportation, logistics, safety, efficiency, and overall trade flows through Southern California. There was a section that focused on the need for a system that was resilient to shocks. I think COVID-19 really illustrated that for everyone, but there are other trends in the freight industry that don't necessarily follow direct economic cycles. We're actually in the midst of a bit of a freight recession right now, and that's not something that maybe the entire transportation industry is aware of when those things happen, but it does have effects on Southern California. It also looked at how the rise in e-commerce, which has been going on for some time, is really changing the length and complexity of supply chains that pass through and throughout Southern California. Goods don't just come to the Port of LA, Long Beach, Waimea, and San Diego, and then immediately land in Southern California or head out to the region. They, in some cases, will actually leave the region and then come back, making several stops along the way. And that's not something that's well understood by regulators at this point. The other thing is it really emphasized how critical zero emissions technology and infrastructure is to meeting the emissions goals, public health needs, and the needs of efficient transportation in the region. Finally, SCAG also just completed a warehousing white paper that assessed the relationship between regional growth, so focus on things like freight, employment, housing development, and individual service sectors within the industrial and transportation and warehousing industries. It also described changes in technology and e-commerce platforms that have driven an explosion in kind of omni-channel or direct consumer retail and how that's reshaping freight movement within the region. It also examined recent industrial facility growth in the region. So, we're seeing more warehouses pop up, but we're also seeing a slowdown at the same time. What does that mean for land development in the region? And there's also the needs of kind of operational constraints and then the actual workforce development and training that's needed to support it. So next I'll go over, excuse me, I'm overcoming a bit of a cough. I'll go over some of the updates to the current goods movement planning that is going on at SCAG right now. So the ZETI study, or the Zero Emission Truck Infrastructure Study, is designed as a blueprint for a battery electric truck and hydrogen fueling for the region, primarily focused on the deployment and need for infrastructure in the near term and future years. So right now it's wrapping up the majority of the technical work. There's been a really extensive modeling and simulation effort, kind of the first of its kind for California, and in some ways the nation, to really understand the need for charging demand at a very fine-grained level. So the last simulation runs are actually going on, I believe, right now this week as we speak. And the initial results we've seen from baseline have yielded some results that we expected, but some other interesting outcomes that weren't necessarily anticipated, and in some ways also reflect some of the constraints of modeling this work as well. There's no replacement for real world actual experience, where has been pretty limited so far. There's also been extensive validation needed and confirmation of some of our input assumptions, the way that modelers think about trucking, the way that planners think about trucking, and the way that trucking fleet operators and even individual truckers think about how charging will affect them varies, and we wanted to account for all of that when we were putting this together. So again, very detailed simulation that has to happen here. So the final simulation results and truck market analysis will be key supporting inputs to the On the Move plan, and I think other efforts here at SCAG. We did have a fairly in-depth information item update on the technical modeling back in March of this year. So we can always send that around to committee members if they're interested in revisiting. The team is also developing a prioritization tool. This is focused at a parcel level to support stakeholders who really want to understand what charging demand looks like, in their specific region, or even kind of smaller focus area, maybe in some of their industrial sectors. Especially if they're in the process of developing charging stations, or they're reviewing ZEV locations within the region, right? This is good for private industry. This is good for public entities. This is good for regulators and even the public who's just interested in knowing what's going on. We're also scheduling the last 2 technical advisory committee meetings, again, kind of making up for time on some of the delays in the modeling work. And we're starting initial work on a final set of report deliverables and a primer for local agencies. The Goods Movement Unit also recently completed 3 industry listening sessions, which focused on, kind of like we've been talking about, a better understanding of near-term issues for the industry. We talked to trucking fleets, terminal operators, the ports, railroads, both short line and Class 1, and really wanted to also understand how they were planning for major events like the Olympics, which were just mentioned, the FIFA World Cup, and any other sort of major events or disruptions that could affect the region. We also wanted to take it as an opportunity to learn about industry's own development plans and growth forecasting in the future. We can look to our own work, but we don't necessarily know what's going on behind the curtain with them. And in these small sessions, it's a good opportunity to get them to open up a little bit and make sure we're developing things in an integrated manner. So last, I'll go over the plans for the upcoming Comprehensive Sustainable Regional Freight Plan. So first, let me talk a little bit about the first Comprehensive Freight Plan that was called On the Move, was completed in 2013. So it focused on a couple of kind of key themes that are listed here on the slide, and then I'll talk a little bit about the prioritization of freight rail to move goods more efficiently and with fewer emissions throughout the region. We're already seeing the ports develop their rail programs extensively, and I think a lot of construction has been breaking ground recently after years and years of design and development. There was also an emphasis on system-wide planning as opposed to focusing on individual components or areas within supply chains in Southern California. We really operate as a system, and you have to look at it as such. There was a focus on reducing community impact, so going out and reaching out to folks within the region and talking about how freight is impacting their day-to-day lives. And we also looked at strategies to keep economic benefits freight in communities while also meeting logistics workforce needs. So again, there's some kind of key themes here that we're continuing to touch on throughout all of our studies and projects that will go into On the Move. So this 2024 update is going to focus on leveraging a lot of the industry relationships we've built through these past studies. It's something that's very difficult to do, to get private industry to open up and talk about sort of what their needs are, how they're planning to grow in the future, and some of the specific operational decisions that they make for their facilities in Southern California. We also are going to do an updated needs assessment that accounts for recent trends in global trade, the growth of e-commerce, zero emissions deployment, and other factors that are either improving or affecting freight movement in the region. We're going to look at shifts in supply chain dynamics. Some of those were described in the warehousing white paper, but we think with a more comprehensive approach, we can go deeper and get a better understanding of that. And we're going to have a comprehensive improvement to SCAG's heavy-duty truck model. This is a key input for Connect SoCal, something that we rely on, and it hasn't been updated sort of comprehensively in several years. And that'll allow us to do more detailed forecasting for individual truck markets. We can do additional off-model analyses and even incorporate some of the findings from SETI into the model itself. Finally, excuse me. Finally, there's going to be the development of a financing plan and long-term freight scenario forecasting for the region. We realize that we can't predict something as complex and diverse as goods movement with an accurate crystal ball. So we want to understand highs, lows, if things change, how we're going to account for that in our planning. There's a number of other tasks and subtasks that analyze very specific aspects of this. But this is kind of a very quick high-level overview. And there'll be more information as we move to go through procurement and select a consultant to help us out with that. To touch on that really quickly, right now, this is the current timeline for the comprehensive freight plan. Right now, we're refining our scope and budget and preparing to start procurement for a consultant. We're targeting work to start in the first quarter of 2025, and the goal is to complete the majority of work in tandem with the release of the 2028 Connect SoCal. Also thinking about things like, again, the World Cup and the Olympics, and seeing if we can leverage some of the initial and midstream work to just support those efforts overall. So thanks for listening. I'm happy to take any of your questions if you have them.
Thank you. I'll call on members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
Mr. Chair, no members of the public are here. Oh, sorry. We have Lucy Dunn.
Thank you. Lucy Dunn, I'm the business representative for the Regional Council, and I understand, because I'm not officially a member of this committee, that I get to speak during public comment. So I'll thank you very much for the opportunity. In light of the goods movement report, I just wanted to bring to your attention a gut and amend bill that just came through the legislature called AB 98. It was strongly opposed by the business community. It really impacts San Bernardino and Riverside counties and is a totally unfair warehousing bill, takes away local control. It was also strongly opposed by CSAC and the League of Cities unanimously. They were cut out of the negotiating process. And I shared this information with Kevin Gilhooly. I know that COME is aware, and I'll raise this as well as at Regional Council. It passed through the legislature, very, very slim margins with no negotiations. It's now on its way to the governor's desk, and the business community would strongly urge SCAG to take an opposed position on this bill. In light of the presentation on goods movement, it just upends all of SCAG's plans if we don't come out strong on this and make sure our staff includes a review of that in this plan if the governor in fact does sign it. But thank you very much for the opportunity to share this with you, and I appreciate your guidance and support. I thought, particularly because so many members of the Transportation Committee might not also sit on Regional Council, it was also important to share it with you today. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, now for members of the Transportation Committee, I got to read this reminder. If anybody's attending remotely but is not on the location specified in the agenda, you may observe but not participate in any discussion of this body. So we'll start with Larry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, along the lines of AB 98, AQMD also opposed that before the Assembly, and is also actively lobbying the governor not to sign it. So even the Air District is opposed to it. Going on to the ZETI study and future plans, was hydrogen infrastructure included in any of that study or any of your future plans? And if so, how, and if not, why not?
So yes, it was. I'd say that that was one of the technical difficulties we were dealing with the modeling, was how to accurately sort of reflect hydrogen demand. There's not really any current operating hydrogen fleets in Southern California. There's some demo projects, but nothing that's like a fully fledged operational and operating the way that the industry expects, which is for long haul operations. There are some drayage fleets that are running hydrogen trucks, and we have spoken with them and we're tracking that closely. Also, I'd note that we are tracking AB 98 closely. And to respond to the previous speaker as well, we'll be conducting a policy analysis as part of the On the Move plan.
But the hydrogen trucks are coming and they are the solution for the long haul. The drayage trucks will work very well on the battery electric, but the long haul trucks will need the hydrogen fuel cell.
I think we're seeing just both on that front, and that's something that we're continuing to talk to fleets with. That's one way we're planning to leverage some of our relationships is get a little bit more in-depth information. Some of those drayage pilots that are happening right now, they're starting to release some of their initial results and start planning for future deployment.
Can I ask a quick question? What's drayage? Tell me what that-
Drayage is movements, for example, from the ports to warehouses or rail yards, very short haul, usually under 200 miles, but in Southern California, sometimes it's even less than 100 miles.
Thank you.
Next will be Searle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
My reaction was,
no.
oh, did you call somebody else?
Yes,
Oh, I'm sorry, my apology.
go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is building on the hydrogen production. I think with this upcoming comprehensive sustainable freight plan, I think that we need to consider obviously adding that in, because I think we are seeing there is a high demand, but I think we also have a really robust deadline to meet zero emissions. So I think there's obviously some legislative issues that we need to address around the production of it, especially how do we make it feasible for cities who would like, many cities like to be a hydrogen hub or of some sort, to be able to allow these long haul and, trucks to be able to go through Central Valley and other areas where there are no hydrogen producing plant right now. So that's kind of I know that it's in the works for the future plan, and we can consider that just because so much is in development right now. And there is a lot of interest. It's just, there's a lot, just like broadband, there's a lot of challenges that we need to identify and how we're going to address this just regionally. The other is I wanted clarification on freight. What do you mean by freight recession? I know we're benefiting a lot from freight movement because of the East Coast is in labor negotiation. So we're benefiting from the additional freight goods movement right now.
So the best way to describe it is right now there's a lot of extra capacity in the trucking sector. And so that leads to lower prices. So a lot of these firms are having trouble staying afloat because they're having to compete on price. A lot of their costs are fixed and don't necessarily change. They're also having to, start thinking about the transition to zero emissions and complying with all the emissions requirements in the state. And so those are just some of the factors. I don't have really detailed numbers in front of me, but basically the freight recessions tend to either precede or come after sort of like your standard economic recession, where we see a decrease in prices or kind of overall growth. So.
All right, Russell, you go ahead.
My apologies again, sorry. So we have a timeline for going to 100% zero emission vehicles, but there's also got to be necessarily a timeline to putting in the infrastructure to support it. Do the two timelines match?
I think it depends on who you talk to. There's a lot of differing opinion on this, even within industry, who have in our listening sessions and our technical advisory committees, in our one-on-one focus groups, has said this is very difficult for them to comply with. They see one of the main issues being kind of a lack of sort of clear policy direction at the local level for implementation, somewhat similar to the broadband permit streamlining. There is some permit streamlining for zero emissions infrastructure, but it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And then they also have to think about the available grid capacity, which is one of the key restrictions.
So the report that's being presented, is that going to answer that question, or is it a question mark? We don't know the answer.
So we're looking at different scenarios that look at, okay, what if we meet our goals? What if we don't meet our goals? What if we manage to exceed them? What if infrastructure development doesn't go as quickly as possible? And so we'll present those. Those are some of actually the last scenarios that are being run.
Okay, and the last quick comment I want to make, Sunline Transit Agency has been running 24 buses on hydrogen fuel for years now. It's not hauling freight, but it's hauling people regularly. And on October 10th, we are having a ribbon cutting for Sunline Transit Agency's new liquid hydrogen station. We're not only running buses on hydrogen, we're producing the hydrogen to run them. So it's a very workable, and I agree with Larry and everybody else here that's a fan of hydrogen. It is really the only way that is going to work. There's not enough electricity capacity that I think you can, anyhow, so I won't get off on that, but you're certainly welcome to the ribbon cutting October 10th at Sunline Transit Agency in Thousand Palms.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry we're running late on time, so I'm gonna have to miss some of the people with their cards up. If you have any questions or comment, please email the staff here at SCAG and get those questions in. We're gonna move on to number 12.
Thank you.
Transportation update. Okay.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for the introduction. And good morning, committee members. We are up last here, so just a few more minutes. My name is Jeremy Marks, and I'm joined by my colleague here, Krista Yost. We're both assistant regional planners within the planning division here at SCAG. And we're going to be providing the most current of a long-running series of updates on trends in different travel metrics affecting the SCAG region. And this presentation includes data that covers through June 2024. So as some background, the impetus for this sort of update series came out of an interest in understanding SCAG's travel recovery coming out of the pandemic. And in particular, we're looking at analyzing transit ridership. So looking at bus ridership across the region, all operators, LA Metro bus and rail ridership, as well as Metrolink ridership by line. We also looked at vehicular travel trends. So metrics like VMT, vehicle hours of delay, as well as truck VMT. And finally, we, for the first time, started looking at work from home trends. So we'll be reporting on movement there as well. I just want to note before moving into further slides that the charts that you'll be looking at are showing monthly totals in these metrics as compared to the same months in 2019. So in that way, we're trying to kind of present that against a pre-pandemic baseline.
So some of the data sources we use to analyze transit ridership trends include the National Transit Database administered by the FTA. It's an online repository of transit operator submitted data on ridership and other transit related data. Limitations include lag in data availability and relying on transit agencies to submit accurate information in a timely manner. And we also looked at LA Metro and Metrolink's ridership data using Metro's online dashboard and ridership reports from Metrolink staff. And again, limitation is a slight lag in data availability. And then for vehicular travel, we source data from the California Performance Measurement System, or PEMS. Roadside sensors collect vehicular travel data on the state highway system. And so a limitation is that this data is only highway data. Data from other roadways like arterials, collectors are not collected, but then there's also no sensors in Imperial County, and at times, sensors can malfunction and be affected by roadside construction. And lastly, for work from home trends, we source data from the U.S. Survey of Working Arrangements and Attitudes, or SWAA. Work from home research provides monthly time series data tracking the extent of working from home post-COVID-19, collected from online surveys. Limitations include oversampling, no data for Imperial County, and focus on national level statistics. So moving on to trends. So bus ridership in the region remains below pre-pandemic levels, but it's been steadily improving. You'll see that steep drop in March and April 2020 when COVID first began, or stay-at-home orders were put into place. And then the blue arrows indicate spikes in ridership, likely due to holiday travel. And you'll see the green arrow shows ridership for the month of January 2024. It's the same for the most recent month, also June 2024. So bus ridership is 13% below pre-pandemic levels at this time, and so it's the closest we've been to recovery. And again, as I mentioned, it's improving, but some challenges remain, like hybrid work. And then for LA Metro, the region's largest transit operator, ridership is still below pre-pandemic levels, but nearing recovery. You'll see rail ridership in blue and bus ridership in orange. So bus ridership has recovered more than rail ridership. And yeah, bus ridership has been recovering steadily since Metro restored full bus service in spring 2023. So 11% below pre-pandemic levels in June 2024. There were some spikes in ridership during the winter months or winter summer months, so most likely again due to holiday travel. And there's been steady growth in rail ridership this year, likely due to Metro increasing heavy rail ridership and light rail ridership, or sorry, light rail service in late 2023, and also the regional connector opening. And for Metrolink, ridership still remains well below pre-pandemic levels. So in June 2024, ridership was 45% below its pre-pandemic baseline level. And there were some drops in ridership during winter months, most likely due to service suspension. There was a spike in ridership in May 2024 for all lines, or the graph is showing ridership by line. And so there was a spike in ridership except for the Riverside line, which seems to be having the most trouble getting riders. But Metrolink is announced plans to increase off-peak service. So since they've been seeing more non-commute trips, so hopefully that will increase ridership across all the lines.
Okay, so I'll try to guide us pretty quickly through the vehicular travel trends, starting with VMT. The shape of this chart should look familiar to you all at this point. It looks very similar to a lot of the other metrics. So again, a steep drop at the beginning of the pandemic, partial near recovery by about mid-2021. And since then, we've seen VMT levels, according to the PEMS data, hover around 5% below what they were pre-pandemic. We do see a brief eclipse above the pre-pandemic level in February 2024. That's the first time that we see that happen, and we hope that that trend continues, of course, into future months. Clicker stopped working. Maybe someone else could advance. Thank you. Okay, so vehicle hours of delay now. Steep drop at the beginning of the pandemic, near full recovery by mid-2021. And we see this metric hover rather than about 5% below, like we saw in VMT, between 20 and 30% below pre-pandemic levels since that partial recovery in the middle of 2021. The last time I presented to this body on this data, we had questions, I believe, from Member Spiegel in particular, come in about how this could be possible that we're 20 to 30% below pre-pandemic levels in vehicle hours of delay. And at the time I expressed, that data was surprising to me too, but it is what the data shows. This time, I think I have a little bit of a better explanation there. And I think that this discrepancy comes out of how this metric is formulated. So this is a measure of how many hours are wasted by sitting in traffic. Therefore, this persistence of about 20 to 30% below pre-pandemic levels means that fewer hours are being spent, person hours, in traffic. So that could be due to something like increased remote working, which I think is actually a pretty plausible explanation given the work from home data that Krista will walk us through in a moment. Lastly, we'll take a quick look at truck VMT. Again, a very similar shape. We see a partial recovery by February 2021 or thereabouts, maintenance at about 5 to 10% below pre-pandemic levels since, and spikes perhaps most predictably with this metric seem to correspond with holiday gift delivery periods around the winter holidays in 2021 and 2022.
So this graph shows bus ridership and VMT trends. So the bus ridership is shown in blue, and then VMT is shown in orange. You can see the deficit in bus ridership is approximately 15% below its pre-pandemic baseline level, and VMT is less than 5% of its pre-pandemic baseline level in June 2024. So both metrics have exhibited similar recovery rates over the course of the pandemic. And then for the work from home trend, so this is the only metric that's above pre-pandemic levels. So work from, and it's showing the monthly full paid working days spent at home. So work from home days peaked at 51% in December 2020, declined to its lowest point at 29% in January 2023, and has remained approximately 30% since. There was a spike in June 2024, which may reflect seasonal fluctuations of remote work, such as school summer vacations. And as for next steps, staff will provide quarterly updates to TC as new data becomes available and analyze region-wide and county-level trends in travel metrics. Thank you. And any questions?
Okay. Do we have any questions from members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
And sorry, we should just quickly note that there's also an accompanying staff report that has many more charts and some more details for you if you're interested.
More charts. Great.
Mr. Chair, no members of the public, either in person or Zoom, wish to speak on this item.
Thank you. So we'll go to members of the Transportation Committee. Start with go with Steve Sanchez.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question, maybe kind of to the previous conversation about hydrogen. Is there an effort to make all these buses into hydrogen? I know we're kind of putting the burden on the sector for trucks, but is government, putting their money where their mouth is, I guess we would say, as far as energy efficiencies and things like that. Is that?
I can try and answer this. So the California Air Resources Board has an innovative clean transit rule. So all of the transit agencies are required to transition to zero emission buses by a certain date. I think it's 2035, but it depends on the size of the operator. And they all have developed rollout plans that explain how they're going to achieve that.
Got it. And then as far as ridership on buses, is there an issue with safety, or people feeling safe on some of the buses, as to why maybe they're not, we don't have a greater impact on riders? Or has a survey or report been done on something like this?
I'm not aware
of the answers. I love it.
Not aware of specific surveys, although I suspect there are. But anecdotally, yes, the perception of safety and security has been raised by many as a reason why they're reluctant to get back onto transit.
And so is that something that we're, as a body, going to look into? I mean, if we're trying to get ridership and we know that that's a issue.
So yes, in a sense, this will be, I think, part of the discussion at the regional council today. We have a panel on transit ridership recovery, but we are participating. So COME Ajise is on a transit transformation task force that's being run by the California State Transportation Agency in response to, I'm going to get this number wrong, SB 125. And so it requires CalSTA to develop a report to the legislature on how to help transit ridership recover, and safety and a number of other issues are part of that discussion. Yeah.
Okay. Donald Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly, since we're out of time, you tell us next steps. We will basically keep getting reports. You'll update us. Okay, what are we, the Transportation Committee or SCAG in general, supposed to do as opposed to just learn what the trends are? Should we be advocating policies to pick ridership back up? And I know that's a question maybe comes up at regional council. Should we say, well, wait a minute, the public has spoken. They want more work from home. We should stop subsidizing public transportation or urging subsidizing public transportation. What do we do with this information?
I think the answer to that question is probably up to this body.
Does staff have any recommendation? You throw us this information. Does staff
If I can interject here.
Because next steps don't tell us
yeah.
anything. It just says, we'll keep telling you what's going on out there.
If I can interject here, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Annie, and I'm Deputy Director for Transportation. We actually have a comprehensive set of transportation strategies that are incorporated into our 2024 Connect SoCal with some implementation strategies. And so a lot of the recommendations are incorporated in there, and we can certainly come back and provide greater update on some of those implementation elements. Along with that, this trends update is really intended for us to continue to provide some context. We've gone through a significant amount of data to come up with recommendations for our planning process for Connect SoCal. And you know what? The information constantly is changing. And so it's up to us to continue to monitor some of these data points and to adjust as needed. And that's really the point of the information that's coming to you quarterly. But most definitely, we have incorporated recommendations. That's a part of our Connect SoCal. We will certainly come back to you and provide information on some of those implementation strategies.
All right. Isn't that the answer to the next steps question? Pursuing those particular plans and strategies? But I'll just leave it with this. I see a disconnect. I see we've got these strategies and we're pursuing them. Oh, by the way, here's a whole bunch of data. And from this data, I don't necessarily see that the thing to do is what's in these other plans. The thing to do is figure out from the public, what does it want? What does it need? And how can we best serve it would be my sense. And I didn't see any of that in this report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I want to thank the presenters for this valuable information, including some of the variables that may impact some of the information that was provided here today. I find it incredibly important that we continue to monitor key metrics of the policies that this organization sets and reviews. That's the purpose of this agency. And do genuinely appreciate the way it was presented. Thank you.
All right, online we have Carol Moore.
Thank you. I want to express my support for many of the statements made. And I wondered a couple of things that I wonder about. Number one, working from home, but also the very fact that we're able to attend this very meeting and not have hundreds of people driving in. That adds up too. But I also wondered if some of the effects, so I think we should continue to support that. People not attending meetings, certainly we want open and transparency, but we want to make sure we don't have to waste time on roads when it's not necessary. I wonder if I looked at the issue of Christmas buying, but I also wondered one other thing. If economic constrictions or downturns is also affects what goes on here, because that would affect the trucks, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. Martha McLean, or did you want to comment on that first? No, good. Okay, Martha McLean.
Hi, yes, good afternoon almost. I wanted to suggest that perhaps you use a different benchmark, because showing a 45% drop in Metrolink ridership really doesn't give the true picture, because as was mentioned before, people are working remotely. So will you ever get above or up to the pre-pandemic level? And if you look at the chart, you'll see the Antelope Valley line is second in increasing ridership. And what needs to be done is not to spend less money on transportation dollars, but to recommend more to increase scheduling. So working remotely absolutely does change the data. So I would suggest maybe, and at the regional council meeting, maybe bring it up, that the 45% drop does not really give the true picture, because ridership on the Antelope Valley line is actually up.
Thank you. Adele Andrade Stradler.
Yes, Adele Andrade Stadler,
representing the COG, the San Gabriel Valley COG, but also coming from the city of Alhambra. At the risk of sounding like I wasn't paying attention, I really was. Can you just tell me exactly what was measured at work from home? You went from a pre-pandemic peak of 51%, and then in January 2023 at 29. Can you just briefly explain that, if you would, exactly what you're measuring?
So it's the monthly or monthly percentage of paid working days or paid working days spent at home. I have it in this slide. I can just pull that up. Yes, yeah. So it's
okay.
Yeah, it should
Thank you.
just if that answers your question.
And I'll look at it again, but thank you, and I appreciate that. I appreciate your report.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions, or everybody's good? Hands? All right, we're gonna move right along to the chair's report. Thank you very much for your presentations, by the way, everybody. Good public comment. Yep. I'm going to say, please join me in welcoming the new members to the Transportation Committee. Andrew Lara, Regional Council District 31, Pico Rivera. Welcome. Adele Andrade Stadler of Alhambra.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And Mike Goodsell from ICTC. Is he online? Okay. Southern California Demographics Workshop registration remains open for SCAG's 2024 Demographic Workshop, where industry-leading experts will discuss how changing population growth affects regional planning, from accommodating growth to improving quality of life and growing the economy. The event will be held on September 24th in person at SCAG's main office here in downtown Los Angeles and online. In-person attendance is free for elected officials and city managers of SCAG's member jurisdictions. Go Human Community Streets Awareness. In August, Go Human Community Streets Grant Program awardees completed 15 traffic safety community engagement projects throughout the region. From Imperial County to Ventura County, awardee projects included 9 safety leadership workshops, 10 walk audits and community bike rides, 7 temporary traffic safety demonstration projects, 4 data collections efforts, and 3 traffic safety storytelling projects. For more information on the 2024 Go Human Community Streets Grant Program, visit the SCAG website. Applications for 2025 will open in spring of next year. And that's the end of my report. We have a Metrolink report now, so I'll call on past President Art Brown.
Thank you. Metrolink is holding its annual Rail Safety Month along with the rest of the nation's railroads. They're ramping up their efforts to raise awareness and promote safe behavior near railroad tracks and at crossings throughout Southern California. The safety of customers and the surrounding community is always Metrolink's top priority, and Rail Safety Month is a timely opportunity to highlight the importance of this. Throughout the month, Metrolink will be educating passengers as well as drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists about critical safety practices, including reminders to stay off your phone while near the train tracks, listen attentively, hear the postage signage, thereby making it easier for others to choose safety. Metrolink hopes to prevent tragedies and save lives. Metrolink has a new Chief Technology Officer, Kevin Gray. He'll support Metrolink's evolution from a traditional commuter line to a more robust passenger rail model with more frequent trains and more midday and evening service, helping to change how Southern California thinks about mobility. If you're not on the RC, if you want to stick around later for the RC meeting toward the end, Darren Kettle, the CEO of Metrolink, will be here to provide discussion of operational changes ridership recovery through optimized service, new infrastructure and innovative technology. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to our staff report from Yvette Macias.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yvette Macias, Skag Inland Empire Government Affairs Officer, filling in for my colleague David Salgado. I will be very brief with our report so we can get going and get some good lunch. Just a quick reminder that Skag's active transportation and safety call for applications for the Sustainable Communities Program remains open until September 27th, 2024. If you have any questions, feel free to visit the Skag website or contact Rachel, Senior Regional Planner. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we come to the time for announcements, member announcements. I'd like to say something really quick. I really apologize for cutting some people off that had comments on that one item. I'm really sorry about that, but the timeline's kind of changed on me, so we're trying to move it along. I was very interested in what Russell had to say about that hydrogen plant. I want to know more about that because we're getting ready to build one in Ventura County, so I want to see all about that. Any other members have comments or announcements at this time? Anybody online? Okay. All righty. All right, so then we're going to adjourn in recognition of Rosh Hashanah. This committee will not be meeting next month. Our next meeting is scheduled for November 7th, 2024 at 10 a.m. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all for coming and thank you for participating online.
Thank you so much, Terry. You made that meeting very easy.